Alrighty then, what's up everyone? It's Shooting Game Weekly episode number 144. And this week, checking out Hyper Duel. This is a game from Tecnosoft, also known for the Thunder Force series, and in fact, games kind of like a Thunder Force game. So we'll be getting into talking about that, and we'll be looking at one credit clear run, and a scoring run, I guess. If you want to call it that, of the game from a Japanese player, or a player anyway, and then we also might look at Icarus's replay as well, who is the guest of the episode. So yeah, what's up, Icarus?
Hello, how you guys doing?
Pretty good here, and I'm joined by Maximo as well, who's co-hosting.
Sup, everybody?
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Hyper Duel, kind of where it stands with Thunder Force and that type of thing, Icarus, and a bit about this game.
Okay, well, Hyper Duel is actually, if I remember correctly, the second arcade game by Tecnosoft, who are, as you say, are very well known for the Thunder Force series. There's actually supposed to be 3 games, the third one being Blast Wind, but that could be talked about another time. This one is actually unique in that it's only released for the, well, actually that's a lie, it's released for the Saturn as well, but it's one of those games which appeared in the arcade first and then got ported to a console rather than the other way around with Thunder Force AC. And it's actually a completely different IP as well, compared to a lot of the Tecnosoft stuff. There is no sequel to this. This is the only game in the series, and it's actually pretty good to play this one. It features transforming ships to mechs, very much like a Macross style aircraft. You have a fighter form and then you can transform into a mech form, and the attacks are completely different. So there is a lot of strategy involved in how you actually use your attacks. There are 3 different types of ships as well, all with different capabilities and all different attack powers, speeds, attack ranges, scoring capabilities, and so on. So there's plenty for different play styles as well. And it's just pretty awesome overall. It's a very short game, but it's also very fast-paced compared to a lot of Tecnosoft's classic console games. So this is pretty challenging even for a lot of players, but it's definitely one worth checking out, I would say.
Yeah. That's cool. So like you can just have a secondary transformation form,
yeah,
basically at all times.
Yeah. Basically,
like that's pretty unique, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, like I said, your ship can actually transform into a fighter form, and it changes a lot of the characteristics of your ship. So fighter form obviously has a thinner hitbox and forward firing capabilities, whereas with the press of a button, you have like 2 shot buttons basically, one for fighter form, one for mech form. If you press the mech form fire button, it changes you into a mech, which has like a much taller sort of vertical hitbox. It's pretty big, but your mech can actually fire in I think 90-degree direction in front of you. So up left to upright to down right. It has a pretty wide cone range of movement for the gun, and you can actually I think it's actually stronger as well, but it's quite hard to use in the arcade version because there's no angle lock button. That's something they added to the Saturn version.
Okay. Yeah, that Saturn version came out like 3 years after the arcade. It seems kind of like a while. It took a while to come out, but I mean,
yeah, it did.
I guess
The interesting thing about the Saturn version, I find, is that they actually changed a few things for it compared to the arcade version. There's a couple of stage and boss differences that you have to be aware of if you're coming from one to the other. But obviously with the Saturn version, there's the graphical upgrades, the music upgrades as well, which is also nice to have. The only thing is, if you're collecting Saturn games at the moment, this is pretty much the most expensive Saturn game in the market at the moment. When I was in Japan, I actually saw it in November last year for 48,000 yen, which is quite a stupid amount of money for a game. It's like PCB prices, practically.
Yeah, print run is like super low, so it tends to be one of the hardest Saturn games to get.
It is one of the hardest, one of the rarest, one of the most expensive as well. So if you're coming to collecting Saturn games at the moment, I'd probably not bother with this one because you're going to be spending a lot of money trying to get a hold of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I got quite lucky many years ago because I actually got into Saturn collecting quite early before the prices exploded. And I just came back from a meet up in Scotland from Malk, like the original founder of the Shmups community. He was having a meet up in Scotland, and he sold me the game actually for about 40, 50 pounds. So I actually got pretty lucky with that. But yeah, a few years ago I actually had to sell my Saturn. But I had that game for quite a number of years, and I played it to death because it was easily one of my favorite games on a Saturn.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you kind of what your history with the game was. So that kind of sounded like that's what it was.
Yeah,
you
pretty much. Yeah.
were doing that, and you found it there. So you hadn't played the arcade version before that?
No, I didn't. I mean, I actually
Okay.
skipped over it. Obviously, it is available in MAME, but I didn't actually take much of a look at it until I got a hold of the Saturn version. And once I started playing the Saturn version, I thought, yeah, this is actually quite a good game. And then, I started playing both concurrently because, like I said, there are small differences between the two. It's not enough to make it like completely different games, but it's enough to change, stage routes and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that was pretty much my history. I came back from a meet, I bought it from a good friend of mine, and I just played it to death ever since.
I see. It looks like a lot of fun, and it looks like a pretty good game. So I'm pretty excited to see what it has to offer here.
Yeah, it is a very short game though. I mean, I think a good clear of it is about 22 minutes long, which, funny enough, is actually one of Tecnosoft's shortest games as well, because the Thunder Force games are like at least 40 minutes long. So for them to make an arcade game that's like half the length, they actually packed quite a lot in, and it's quite a hectic game to play as well. Very fast paced and pretty tricky as well. Quite difficult if you're just coming into it.
I see. Okay, well, we can prepare to start watching the run, I suppose, here. Now, this is a run from a player on YouTube. I think it's his run. His name's The JP, not a JP player. It's The JP, apparently. Didn't notice that.
Actually, he's part of the Shmups forum, or he was. Yeah, I haven't seen him for a while, actually. But yeah, this is one of our own community's replayers, which is pretty cool.
That's always nice.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's just jump into it, I suppose, unless there's anything else you want to preface with. I think we can just go in and just talk about the game.
Yeah, I think we can probably talk about stuff as we go along, because it is a pretty fast game, so it might be things that we want to highlight along the way.
Alrighty then. Do the countdown here on go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yes.
This will be a no-miss run as well.
Yeah, it's pretty good, this. He uses the Buster Gear 03, which is unique in that the mech form, the shot of the mech form is actually short range, but it's like the first two ships combined, so it's like double damage. So it's actually quite a difficult ship to use because you essentially have a melee attack in your mech form rather than a ranged attack. So, and plus there are special attacks as well. If you press both buttons down in one form, you do like a special attack which drains the gauge at the bottom left of the screen. In fighter mode, you do an all range attack, whereas in mech mode, you do an aimed attack. And the special attack for the Buster Gear 03 is actually sort of like splash damage grenades. So they like fire forward to a short range and then they explode, but they do a lot of damage, which is probably why it's actually a lot easier to kill bosses and no-miss the game with, because this ship is actually really, really strong if you know how to use it. But because it's a very short range, like this mech form here, because it's very short range, you need to be obviously a lot closer to enemies, which can be quite dangerous because bosses have extremely fast attacks that spray everywhere, and you have to be very careful of what you're doing. First stage is pretty short though. This boss is like quite easy. In the Saturn version, there's actually a safe spot in the top left corner you can sit in. But in the arcade version, obviously it's not there, so you have to kind of orbit it as it keeps coming around you. So you have to keep going around to the front and then to the back to kill it. But if you focus your attacks on it, you can kill it pretty quickly. End of stages have these score bonuses. Stock bonus is actually how many options you pick up. So you can pick up two types of options. One's a gunner, which has lower health but fires in like a sort of semi-intelligent way at enemies. So it like aims in different directions, but it kind of has a tendency to die quite quickly. The other option is a tracer, which is like sort of slow-moving Gradius-style option that fires forward. So the stock bonus is how many of those you have left. Perfect bonus is 100% destruction, and the bottom bonus is the gauge bonus, which is like how much special attack you have remaining. So scoring is essentially ensuring that you have all of your bonuses at the maximum. Stage 2 is pretty tricky because it's in a ship, but obviously with it being a horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up, you can actually crash into the scenery. What a lot of players don't realize is that the mech form is actually invincible to scenery, so you can actually switch the mech form here and fly up and down in the scenery without dying, which is usually a good way of actually getting through the cramped sections of this stage, and it's like that with all the other stages as well. Obviously horizontal scrolling shoot 'em ups are pretty tight on space, like this bit here. So if you're in mech form, you can actually just swing your weapon up and down and bump into the moving scenery without dying, which is always nice. A lot of people don't realize that. Stages are obviously very short as well. Yeah, so we're coming up to the second boss here. This boss is actually quite tricky to play when you're just starting out, because it moves erratically, sprays bullets everywhere, and it has this really large cluster bullet which homes in on you after a certain period of time. On this form here, and also sometimes it fires this purple laser after charging up, and if you're not paying attention, you can fly into one or all of these attacks quite easily. But this ship will actually decimate bosses very quickly because, like I mentioned, it has that cluster bomb attack, cluster bomb special. So this boss is just down very quickly.
Wow.
Dang.
It's somewhat quicker than I'm used to.
Yeah, this ship is extremely powerful if you know how to use it, but it's actually quite tough because it's also the slowest ship. The fighter shot has got the lowest auto fire speed, and the mech form has virtually no range. It's a melee attack, so you really need to know what you're doing in the game in order to make use of this ship. But it's very, very powerful. Yeah, so stage 3, just swarms of enemies. It's actually quite tricky to get the perfect on this because enemies have a tendency to pass through those domes, and if you're not using the Buster Gear 02 or the Buster Gear 01, which has like really fast attacks or piercing attacks, you'll very often miss one of those enemies, which means you don't get a perfect bonus at the end of it. A B power-up is a gauge power-up. It gives you, I think, a sixth of your power-up gauge. And that's one thing I didn't actually mention, is that if you stop moving, you can see your score tick up, but it also starts generating special attack as well. So a lot of the times you'll find yourself just sitting still during dead sections so that your gauge starts to move up, or you start getting a few points.
Nice.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think the scoring system is kind of whack because obviously you sit still, your score goes up, but actually the most amount of points that you'll get in the game is from the end of stage bonuses. So actually knowing how to efficiently complete stages without using all the gauge, without killing all the options, is actually better for scoring.
Wow.
Yeah. This boss is actually quite interesting as well in that it's different on the Saturn version, because the second form he moves around and he stops and then sprays bullets up and down. But on the Saturn version, you can't actually shoot down the bullets. On the arcade version, you can shoot down the bullets. So the little trick in the arcade version is to sit in the top left corner, point your shot downwards, and just don't move, because you always shoot down his attacks and you can do lots of damage to him. In the Saturn version, you actually have to move around because you can't shoot down his shots, so you have to be more careful. And there is a safe spot you can actually exploit in that on the Saturn version, but it's tricky to get to.
Yeah, those plasma mines are just exploding everywhere.
Yeah, they are super strong. And plus you don't use that much special attack with this ship as well, so you can basically spam them everywhere. It's pretty good. The fighter form probably has the best coverage when it comes to killing enemies with the special attack. But if you use the special attack in mech mode, it sprays those plasma bombs right in front of them, so you do a lot of damage in a concentrated area, which is really good for murdering bosses, essentially. I think you'll see it in one of the stages. I think it's like stage 6, where he basically nukes the boss down in like 5-10 seconds, whereas most of the time you'll take you about 20-30 seconds to kill the boss.
The way that little option mech moves around is really peculiar.
Yeah, it tries to get to a certain range in front of an enemy and then, shoot it down, but it's kind of stupid in that it doesn't really pay attention to anything that's around it, so it can very often crash into stuff or bump into walls and things. So it's not really reliable, I don't think, in a lot of stages, because it's also got virtually no health. This boss is a recurring boss as well, the Black Angel. You'll see this one later on, but it's essentially a transforming mech as well, but just extremely big, as you can see. It's actually quite tricky to fight as well, because there is survival rank in this, and survival rank will actually make enemies more resilient. And in the case of this boss, it does a laser sweep, which actually covers more of the screen at higher rank. I'm not sure if you'll get to see it here, because again, this ship will probably kill it really quickly. There we go. Okay. This next stage is sort of an intermission, but it's also a very key scoring stage. These boxes, which appear in a second, you can destroy, and they'll start to release blue medals, these little blue medals here, which when you collect them, they increment up to 10,000 points, and they're a very key score item in this section. There's a little trick you can do, a little route you can do here, where you uncover you pop boxes open, then leave them alive to generate as many medals as possible. And it's pretty much recommended to actually learn this stage if you're trying to go for score, because you can get quite a lot of points out of this. I think
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's around about 300,000 points you can get from this. I'd like to say it's actually probably a little bit more than that if you're more efficient than I am at doing this.
Yeah, 10k each. I mean, damn.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, JP's doing quite well at this at the moment, but obviously that ship will destroy things pretty quickly, so he's having to be a lot more controlled, but yeah, he's doing very well here. You can get quite a lot of points out of this if you do it right. There's no enemies, of course, so you don't have to worry about being shot down, but obviously you can crash into the boxes, so you do have to watch out for that.
Is there any way you can optimize to get even more medals?
I would think so, yeah. I mean, there's probably a much more efficient way of doing it. The way that I do it is essentially the same way that you saw JP do it, in that there's one box that you leave alive to scroll all the way up to the top of the screen before you destroy it.
Okay.
The other boxes you have to be a little bit more careful of, because one of them basically comes up quite close to the bottom left corner of the screen, and the other one goes off to the top right of the screen, so you don't really get much time to actually work with it, so you have to destroy them quickly.
Okay.
The middle box is generally the one that you want to try and leave alive. This stage is really good fun. Has probably the best song in the soundtrack, Black Rain, but this is very fast-paced stage with a lot of enemies popping up from behind. You see a little danger icon flash up on the screen you have to be wary of. But it's pretty tricky, this one, because it starts off like this. There's a lot of enemies coming behind you, there's a lot of stuff coming in front of you. You usually find yourself using all of your special attack at this point. But then after that, it goes up to fight the carrier here, and you've got all these escorts you have to watch out for as well. It's a pretty cool set piece. There's about 4 of these here that you have to destroy pretty quickly, and they fire missiles as well, so you have to be very fast, otherwise they will catch you out. And then this carrier, the Nightmare carrier, you have to take apart in order to get the highest amount of points for it. And as you can see, those plasma mines just rip it apart completely. Whereas the ship that I use, the Buster Gear 02G, it takes a lot longer to actually kill it because it's quite weak. But the ship that I use actually has piercing lasers, which makes it easier to actually get perfects on stages. So there, like I said, there is a lot of variety and a lot of difference in strategy depending on what ship you're using. For pure power though, this ship is probably the best and you can pretty much destroy everything really quickly, like you can see here. Coming up to the next boss, which is Nightmare, a giant mech, and probably I think the second hardest boss in the game, especially at maximum rank, because it has a tendency to spew bullets everywhere. And the bullet patterns are pretty tricky to avoid in this game.
The tarp. It's like, okay. It's like they're worried about it getting rained on, but it just fucking blew up.
Yep. I mean, you always gotta worry about rust.
Well, the stupid detail, but I love that.
Yeah.
The tarp. It's a tarp. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, this is Nightmare. You can see that it's spraying bullets everywhere, but those plasma mines will kill it very quickly, and it's dead.
Oh, were your like side pods blocking bullets there?
Yeah, the options do block bullets, and they also do damage as well if you sit them on top of things. So if you actually have no special energy, you can still pull them out to, you know, defend yourself or to do a little bit of damage and kill weaker enemies. Quite a nice little trick you can do with it. Yeah, second to last stage here, the city stage. This stage has just got lots and lots and lots of enemies in it, so you have to be on your guard at all times. The ship makes light work of everything though, so it's pretty straightforward actually. I mean, the trickiest parts in this stage are these large exploding bullet canisters. They sometimes appear during waves of enemies, which are pretty hard to deal with, so you have to be mindful of what you're doing. And these spider bots as well, they'll spray bullets everywhere. The attack pattern is fixed though, so you can actually sit in a very specific spot on stage and avoid it.
That was... Okay, you're talking about that right there?
Yep, that right there, yeah. Do have to watch out for it. I mean, I think JP was making that look a lot harder than it should be because there's a much easier save spot for that. But he said those spider bots will appear later on alongside lots of these enemies and exploding canisters as well. So that often very often does take a life off people, or two if you're not careful. Yeah, coming up. There we go, it's dead. It's pretty quick to kill the attack though.
It like swerved like through the ground before it died. It was good.
Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward. The boss is coming up though. It's a giant spider mech.
Out and in with two ends. It's good. It's good. Oh, it's a hotel. No wonder.
It's a futuristic hotel with these robots everywhere. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is like the presentation is amazing. Like,
yeah, it's easily one of Tecnosoft's best games, I find. Like,
yeah, this is sick. Like, if you like Thunder Force, like you gotta play this. It seems
it's pretty overlooked, I find, to be honest, though, because a lot of people, when they think Tecnosoft, they think maybe Thunder Force, obviously, but also, you know, games like Elemental Master, you know, their famous console stuff. Arcade games aren't as well known, I would think. Thunder Force AC obviously isn't that well known because it's not that good, to be honest, but Hyper Duel, I find, gets overlooked quite a lot because, you know, not many people have access to it for various reasons. One, because it didn't really leave Japan, and two, the Saturn version is ridiculously overpriced, so not many people can afford it, so that's why people don't really get to play it.
And Saturn emulation is like not the best, so MAME is basically the only way to go if you want to play this.
Yeah, exactly. Saturn version is nice though because, like I said before, the graphics are updated, they look really good, and the soundtrack, the arranged soundtrack is amazing. It's definitely worth checking out even if you just want to listen to a really good soundtrack. It's easily one of my favorite Tecnosoft soundtracks of all time.
An arranged soundtrack? Nice.
Yes, the arranged soundtrack is really, really good.
It is.
Definitely worth checking out. Yeah, this is the last stage as well. So huge robot mech thing, giant battleship. You have to go up the body to different phases, destroy all of the turrets as you go. Obviously, you can see the Black Angel here. It was a boss before, it's now trying to help us out. But there's something interesting that happens afterwards. I'm not going to spoil it just yet. It's pretty cool, this sequence, though. And I actually think the boss that's coming up, the actual last boss, is probably the hardest Tecnosoft boss ever, to be honest. All the games that they've made, the next boss that's coming up is probably one of the most difficult.
Oh, man. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sequence, this. Like I said, you're just flying up the giant battleship thing and trying to destroy all of the turret parts. Black Angel obviously helped you out as well. Oh, here we go. Yoink! And now he's another boss. I love that bit. It's pretty cool, like.
Man.
Yeah, so this is basically Black Angel Mark II, and it gets pretty crazy, this. I find most of this game fairly easy until this boss, when on the Saturn version I basically cleared it losing all 4 of my lives.
Wow.
It's easily one of the most difficult bosses I've come across in a Tecnosoft game. Just not for this phase, but for the last one, when it basically spews lasers everywhere and it does a screen sweep, and everything is random, so there's no memorization at all. And this screen sweep can either be short range, or it can cover the entire screen. By the entire screen, I mean, it can go from the top corner to the bottom corner and not give you any room to move at all. So, yeah,
I'm thinking about that envy attack right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
The purple lasers.
Yeah. That's basically what it is, and that sweep can actually kill you if you're not careful, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks annoying.
Yeah.
It gets some tight dodges.
Well, there you go, he's dead. Dead in a much quicker time than normal. And the no miss as well.
Freeze frame.
And
Whoa.
Game gets blasted into the mech and bang. And that's
He just wanted to help.
Sacrifice is
he did help.
unnecessary, though.
Godsy.
Yeah.
What a god. And fake dwarf Gaiva. The fuck.
Yeah, the name.
Dude, all these names.
Booby Master.
Yes. In dick. Wow.
Voice.
What the fuck?
Ugors.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, these names are pretty good.
Seems like they really like this game that they made. I mean, even doing that Saturn port. It sounds like the Saturn part 2 is just more difficult in general.
It is, yes, it is. They did make it.
Might be, yeah.
They did make a little change to it in that they added a button where you can actually lock the mech's firing angle, so it does make it a little bit easier to play, but the game itself is actually a lot harder because they changed things up to make certain attacks uncancelable and certain attacks, well, not unavoidable, but more difficult to avoid. So Saturn version, I think, is probably a better one to play if you like a harder version of this game.
Would you say that's probably like the definitive version? Like, do you think it's like updated in that way?
Yes, I definitely think it is the definitive version. Just for everything, it's got perfect presentation, and it's definitely a nice game to have. Plus, it comes with the arcade version as well, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
Saturn version
pretty
has
cool.
both the
Nice.
Saturn mode and arcade mode on it, so you get both games, and you can play them both.
No, did we want to take a look at your replay at all for how the other ship plays? Maybe like watch half of it or something.
Yeah, can do if you want. Yeah, I mean, I played the Buster Gear 02, which is a faster ship with piercing laser specials, so it's easier to get perfects on. So yeah, we can do if you want. See how it's played differently.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. You think it'd be better to go to the latter half?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah.
All right. How about maybe we could begin at a certain stage here.
About 7:30 is the start of stage 4, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's go there then. 7:30. And probably want to not capture your Twitch chat there. There we go. All right, sweet. So we're gonna look at Icarus's replay now of his clear, and like you said, he used the number 2 ship. What's it called again?
It's a Buster Gear 02G.
Okay. We'll take a look at that. All right, here's the countdown. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, so I play the BG02G, which, as I mentioned before, is faster. It has a slightly narrower range of attacks, but the special attacks are piercing, which is a lot better for basically sweeping the screen and getting perfects by killing enemies who like to pass through scenery, like in stage 3, for example. With it being
whoa, those lasers.
Yeah, those lasers are pretty good. They're not as strong as
Rave party.
Disco lasers. Yeah.
You just got your trance radio going on in there right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to do that. It's pretty cool. Yeah, this ship is weaker as well, so probably take a little bit longer to kill enemies and bosses, but I kind of like this ship though, just because it's easier to play as, I find. I do recommend this ship or the Buster Gear 01 for beginners, because, you know, it's easier to play as. The BG03, as I mentioned before, is harder to play because it's essentially a melee ship. You have to be up close to stuff, so you need to know the game quite well in order to play it. But this ship is pretty good in that it covers quite a lot of the screen quite quickly, so you can basically sweep all the little enemies out of the way very quickly.
It's great.
Yeah, it's pretty good, this ship. I mean, also,
I don't think I've ever seen an attack like that.
Yeah.
The disco lasers, so it's great.
Disco lasers are pretty cool, yeah. Yeah, it's quite tricky to play this, I find, though, a little bit, because of how weak it is. So you do need to be a little bit more mindful of enemy attacks, especially the bosses as well, because you will be fighting them for a little bit longer than you would do with the other ships. Yeah, and that's the mech special. Called firing lasers. All the mechs fire like the special attacks forward, but they obviously have different properties. The BG01 actually has like a 3-way attack that fires forward, whereas, as you saw with the Buster Gear 03, does the cluster bombs forward instead, which is quite strong. This one just fires 2 lasers. It's not a particularly good special attack with the mech, which is why I don't use it that often.
It's all about the disco lasers.
Yeah, all about the disco lasers. Yeah, so this attack will actually sweep more of the screen at higher rank. This is like essentially maximum survival rank at this point, so the boss does have more aggression and more range. Yeah, so this laser that's coming up will actually cover more of the screen. You actually have to transform to fighter mode in order to avoid it, because if you're in mech mode and you sit at the extreme top and bottom of the screen, you'll still be tagged by it because the hitbox is big. It's a vertical hitbox, which is essentially the entire mech. And this stage, as we saw before with the boxes, I handle in a slightly different way. So I leave one of them to hit the top of the screen like that, and then do that with the next one. It's actually quite a fluid way to play, quite a fluid method once you learn it. It's quite easy to learn.
Sick stuff. And then we see the atmospheric barrier against your ship kind of fading in and out because the video is in 30 FPS.
Yeah.
It's fine though.
One thing I didn't mention before is you can actually see the colony in the background crashing into the planet.
Yeah, that is awesome. Like, there's some really cool moments.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool
Wow.
set piece. This when people see it the first time, it's like, whoa, that's pretty cool, and then huge explosion after that.
And it crashes, and yeah, that's great. It seems so well realized, is kind of the feeling I'm getting from the game.
Yeah, it does have a pretty good narrative flow to it. Like all the stages flow together. There's no like sudden cuts and then changes into like completely different stages, like you would get in say Thunder Force, for example. You can see that they have like a flow to the story where the beginning it's like a fight against the enemy fleet, and then you go through like one of their bases, then through a colony, then onto the planet. You know, it's a very continuous flow, which is really nice. I like it when shmups do that with their stages and not like suddenly jump to something completely different, because I feel like it does take you out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a nice transition there.
Yeah.
Just kind of flew to the planet and then
Yeah.
slowly to the water.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Very nice. Get some rain and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and this stage again is pretty tricky. It was obviously easier with the Buster Gear 03 because you kill everything with the plasma mines, but here you actually have to use a lot more of your special attack, well I do, in order to kill the stuff that comes behind. Otherwise they start shooting upwards at you, and it's enemies don't hesitate to point blank you in this game, so like that. So you actually have to be very careful.
Wow.
One thing I did mention before is that in the arcade mode version, you can't actually lock your mech's firing angles, so you actually have to know where to position, how to position it. So quite tricky, but it's something you learn over time. Yeah, and as you can see, I'm not actually destroying the ship's parts as quickly with this ship because it's quite weak.
You got to believe it.
Learning this section is pretty fun though, because these enemies like pop up from the water, and you've got these explosive mines that you have to shoot. But if you learn how to position yourself, you can actually kill them both quite easily and with minimum fuss. But I see a lot of like new players like get to this bit and they're like using all of their special attack. It just takes a little bit of learning in order to get through this without actually using it.
I see. I pulled up the Dangun Fever on soundboard. So I'm just throwing some clips in once I see those lasers occasionally.
Use what you want.
So I'm going to actually spend a bit more time killing this boss because again my ship is quite weak, so I actually have to learn a movement pattern to avoid its faster spray in the second form. It's actually quite difficult to do. I only recently learned this as well. When you phase it to the second form, you actually have to go from the top left corner to the bottom left corner really slowly, like what I'm going to do here. It's like bullet leading. If you don't do that and you start moving around everywhere, it just covers the screen in bullets, which makes it incredibly hard to avoid.
It does look tricky.
Yeah, it is pretty tricky, that attack. When I first started playing this, I actually found this boss to be the hardest to learn because that spray pattern seemed kind of random to me. But after I learned that it's actually an aimed attack with like small grenades that fire bullets at you when you destroy them, it become a lot easier to actually deal with. And this stage is just fun to do. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, as I mentioned before, but there's just so much going on that you need to be mindful of, and so much that you need to kill in order to get the perfect bonus that you're always very focused on this. It's actually quite easy to miss the perfect here because there's these little robots that stand on platforms that appear on the right side of the screen. But what they do is that the platform pulls back and it drops the mech straight down. And if you don't actually kill the platform, that's like basically 1% of your enemy destruction total lost. So you can lose your perfect very easily in this stage if you're not killing everything and not keeping an eye on certain enemies that tend to appear and disappear. Yeah, I got tagged there. This, like I said, this stage can be quite tricky though if you're not careful.
No!
Ideally, you should have the homing missiles, which is like the stage 2 power-up for your ship. This is like only the stage 1 power-up, and you can see it's actually getting kind of hard to kill things because enemies are flying around everywhere, so you actually have to use your special attack in order to catch stuff.
Funky music.
Spider Mech was awesome.
Coming up to the boss here.
I guess there's the actual Spider Mech.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I handle the Spider Mech in a different way. You saw JP using fighter mode and just spamming the special attack, whereas I'm actually using mech mode and I'm aiming at a very specific point on the mech. What you don't normally see is you see these white lasers appear and like they catch onto you and they slow your movement down. You actually have to watch out for those because again, when you get to a phase like this, if your movement is slowed, then it's quite hard to avoid the bullets that are coming at you.
Man, the animation on that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really nicely done.
Nice, got him.
Pest control, sir.
Can't stop this feeling.
Yeah, and the last stage here. There is no power-ups in this stage, I forgot to mention, so if you die, the only power-up you get is from the respawn carrier. There's no extra power-ups in this. So if you actually want to make sure that you kill the boss, you shouldn't die at all during this phase, which can be actually very hard to do because the first phase is actually very tricky. You can see those turrets sat at the top of the screen. It's actually one of the scariest phases I find for this particular stage. But once you've actually cleared those turrets off the top, it's easy to deal with. And if you want to get some extra points, as I mentioned before, just sit in one place. It takes up your score for a little bit and also regenerates special bar at the bottom, which is absolutely required anyway. So it's usually worth doing.
Do these phases
Not bad.
time out at all? Like,
Did
to milk?
they time out at all, did you say? Yes,
Huh?
I think they do, but in this particular case, the Black Angel will actually kill the boss for you, so this boss doesn't actually time out. Other
Okay.
bosses do, though. Yeah, other bosses do time out, though. I don't think they do special attacks if they time out, though. It's not like, you know, the more modern shoot 'em ups where if you time a boss out, it does like this revenge attack and covers the screen and something. In this game, I think they just kind of disappear, but you lose like the perfect bonus at the end, so it's usually worth going for them anyway if you're trying to get a score.
Okay.
Yeah, I did put the arranged soundtrack on. It is pretty amazing.
Yeah, your range sound
You were right.
good, isn't it? Yeah, it's by Tsukumo Hayukataro. And he's done quite a lot of soundtracks for Tecnosoft, including the really good Thunder Force 5 soundtrack. I think a lot of people have probably heard that one. It's just loads of like rock guitar and everything. It's amazing. But a soundtrack that most people probably haven't heard of is the Blast Wind one for Saturn. That's definitely one to check out as well. It's in a similar vein to Thunder Force 5 and the arranged Hyper Duel one. But it's a really good soundtrack, that one. Definitely worth checking out.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Blast Wind is actually a really good game as well. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, it was supposed to be an arcade game, but for some reason they didn't release it. And it ended up on Saturn as a vertical game. So it's like vertical scrolling, but in a horizontal format. It's actually quite a good game, but a little bit easy, I find, to be honest, with it being like a console-only Tecnosoft game. But it's definitely one to check out if, you know, you have the opportunity to, because it's an interesting game with it being a vertical Tecnosoft game, with Tecnosoft being more well known for the horizontal games. What's interesting about Blast Wind, though, is that it was actually supposed to be a vertically scrolling, vertically oriented arcade shoot 'em up, and there was like screenshots of it in like an advertisement in a magazine a long time ago. I think I've still got the magazine somewhere, but yeah, it was supposed to be a vert scroller, So it's interesting that they actually changed the orientation for it for the console game.
Maybe it was due to STG sales.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's the only thing I could think of, because I remember like reading that internationally, like because of the way they designed those cabinets looking like garbage cans, apparently didn't do a lot of arcade operators like hated those, or at least the way they looked.
Yeah. Samurai Nico, Blastwind Arcade was originally supposed to be before Blastwind Saturn, but they cancelled it for whatever reason and then released it on Saturn. So yeah, it was cancelled. Not sure why. Probably in some interview somewhere it's been mentioned, but yeah, I'm not quite sure of the specifics. All I know it was supposed to come out and it looked pretty cool, but it didn't. Unfortunately, it's a shame, really. I mean, Tecnosoft don't have a really huge arcade pedigree since they've only done 2, but obviously with this game they should have kept going, because I think a lot of their games would have been pretty cool in the arcades.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can see this boss is kicking my butt.
Yeah, a bit of a different story here than the other run.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, because my ship is actually quite weak, it becomes very hard to kill this boss, and it took a lot longer to do it. That's why I usually have to get here with at least 3 lives, because guaranteed it takes at least 2 off me.
Wow.
Bang.
Oh, for a second I thought I said burger gear.
And we got the funny credits as well. Yeah, it's a good game, this. I do recommend people check it out if they haven't seen it before, haven't played it before. It is pretty tough when you're starting out, but once you actually get into the flow of it, it becomes one of the best games ever. It's really fast-paced and pretty absorbing, I find.
Seems like everyone except like the composer and like one other guy didn't use aliases.
Yeah.
The composer's like, leave me out of your game, or
Yeah.
figurative game. Put me in the game is what he actually meant. I like that last picture too.
Yeah.
Really classy stuff.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, damn.
Yeah, they did.
Definitely looks like worth playing.
Yeah, they did different ending art for the Saturn version, so it's definitely worth checking that out as well.
Very interesting. The faces. The fuck.
Yeah. There's a funny bug in the arcade game where if you all clear the game, it actually puts your score in twice.
Huh.
I don't know why it does that. For some reason, it happens on the Saturn version as well.
Good stuff, good stuff.
Nice run.
Yeah, Hyper Duel. Yeah, good run. I mean, we watched some of it, but how long ago did you do that run anyway?
That run which we watched was a couple of years ago, actually, on stream. I did recently do another all clear a few months ago, just for a bit of fun, with, funny enough, almost exactly the same score. So that run we just watched was a 2.21 million all. I did another 2.21 million all like a couple of months ago. It's just something I like to play every so often because it's just fun to play. Yeah. So,
yeah, when it's fun to play, it's just fun to play.
Yeah, exactly.
You revisited a few times and whatnot.
Yeah, I like to play it again every so often just because, you know, it's a nice little blast. It's pretty short. You don't really have to think too hard about scoring in order to, you know, get good points. And I like the actual flow and the set pieces of it. It's just a nice experience to play.
Seemed like a little bit more like faster pace than your average Thunder Force game.
Oh, definitely.
Like, would you? Yeah. So you'd agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. It is faster paced. I mean, obviously it is shorter, so they had to pack a lot more in a much shorter space of time. But just overall, it's a much more intensive game to play compared to Thunder Force because there's not as much downtime, and there is a lot more challenge in it as well. So it's definitely worth checking out.
Maybe they learned a thing after doing the Thunder Force arcade version. They learned a thing or two about making arcade games. So
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it would have been nice to see them keep making arcade games, because on the strength of this game, they would have probably been pretty prolific, I would think, in arcade shmups. But for whatever reason, they can't blast wind and didn't make any more arcade games after that, which is a shame, really, because I mean, I guess it might have something to do with the costs of making arcade games. PCBs weren't exactly cheap to manufacture back in the day, so I guess that's probably why they didn't do it as often as console stuff.
93 is kind of an interesting year,
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. 93 generally
For it
when
to
you
come
saw a
out.
lot of experimental
Yeah.
hardware, definitely. I think it would have been quite hard to compete with the likes of Taito, for example, which put out the hardware that Rayforce came on, and everyone's seen
F3.
Rayforce. Such an amazing game for the time as well, like 1992, 1993. So it would have been quite hard to compete with something like that, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for that year, just like reading other interviews, basically like the whole sphere is like super competitive. So if
Yeah.
you didn't have like either top tier hardware working around it, you weren't
Yeah.
going to get as much attraction as like other companies.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that's probably why they didn't do it. So, it's a shame, but they made Hyper Duel, which, everyone should be happy about, because it's just a really good game and a pretty good piece of history, I find. Definitely something worth looking at if you haven't seen it before. Or if you even like,
Indeed.
yeah, even if you like Tecnosoft stuff as well and you've not heard of it, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it definitely gets me in the mood for some Tecnosoft
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
Like in general.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Tecnosoft. I play a lot of their games, and so this is easily one of their best, if not their best game out. It's just basically all of their knowledge and all of their style distilled into one game. I find it's like all of the best stuff from Thunder Force and Elemental Master and all the other shmups that they've done, just shoved into a short 22-minute arcade game. With a really cool presentation. I mean, who doesn't like transforming mechs? It's just pretty
Indeed.
Same.
cool. Yeah.
Indeed. Alright, well, I think that about covers it for the episode. Really good stuff. For episode 144, Hyper Duel. Of course, thanks again, Icarus, for coming on.
No problem.
Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's always nice to be on.
And suppose that's gonna do it for us this week. Man, I'm always like shitty at ending these. We really need an outro movie or something.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
So if anyone would like to just send that to me in my inbox, that'd be great. Alright. Alright, that's all I got. Okay,
Yeah.
so thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Definitely more techno stuff in the future.
Oh, hell yes.
Alright. Yeah, off.